Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Burt Reynolds, the enduring charm of Hollywood's mustached maverick. Few stars ever matched the swagger, charm, and sheer pop culture gravity of Burt Reynolds. The actor whose easy grin and outlaw sparkle made him one of Hollywood's most bankable icons of the 1970s and early 1980s. With a career that stretched across 6 decades, Reynolds carved out a place in entertainment history as a charismatic leading man, a stunt-loving action hero, and later, a reflective performer with surprising emotional depth. From Southern kid to breakout talent, born Burton Leon Reynolds Jr. on February 11, 1936, in Lansing, Michigan, and raised in Florida, he originally dreamed of becoming a professional football player. A serious injury shifted his path, nudging him into acting. After some early stage work, television came calling. Roles in Gunsmoke and Dan August introduced him to American households and showcased the confident, slightly rebellious presence that would become his signature. Superstardom and the smoky era. The 1970s were Reynolds' golden era. With films like Deliverance, 1972, he proved he had dramatic muscle. But it was the action comedy lane where he reached orbit. Smokey and the Bandit, 1977, made him a box office phenomenon, with his black Trans Am, infectious laugh, and famous mustache becoming cultural landmarks. Hits like The Longest Yard, Hooper, and Cannonball Run cemented him as America's favorite roguish daredevil. During this period, he wasn't just a star, he was the star. Throughout the late 1970s, he was consistently the #1 draw in theaters, an achievement only a few actors in history can claim. A complicated middle chapter success came with turbulence. Some high-profile misfires, business challenges, and personal struggles chipped away at his Hollywood dominance in the 1980s and 1990s. Still, Reynolds never lost his self-awareness or ability to poke fun at himself. He worked steadily in film and television, including the popular sitcom Evening Shade, which won him an Emmy and reminded audiences that his charm still played beautifully on screen. A late career triumph, Reynolds surprised critics and fans again with his standout performance as porn kingpin Jack Horner in Boogie Nights, 1997. The role earned him Oscar and Golden Globe nominations and reintroduced him to a new generation of viewers. It was the kind of part that reminded everyone he wasn't just a charismatic performer. He was a genuinely gifted actor. Legacy of a Hollywood original. Burt Reynolds' legacy is more than a filmography. It's the spirit he embodied, rebellious, funny, warm, and deeply human. He passed away on September 6, 2018, but the imprint he left on American pop culture is unmistakable. From car chase comedies to nuanced character work, Reynolds proved he could do it all while keeping his sense of humor and heart firmly intact. Whether he was outrunning the law in a Trans Am or delivering a soft, introspective line on screen, Burt Reynolds lived his career with a kind of joyful bravado that audiences never forgot. In the end, he didn't just play icons. He became one. Burt Reynolds, Hollywood rebel, cultural phenomenon, and the heart behind the mustache. Burt Reynolds remains one of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment. Not only because of his signature mustache or his legendary laugh, but for the electric blend of toughness, humor, and vulnerability he brought to every role. He was the guy audiences wanted to befriend, cheer for, or ride shotgun with on a wild cross-country chase. His career was a roller coaster of monumental highs, painful lows, and undeniable resilience, making him one of the most fascinating stars Hollywood ever produced. Early life. A detour that created a legend. Reynolds' early life didn't point straight toward the spotlight. Growing up in Riviera Beach, Florida, he was an all-American athlete with a powerful build and a competitive fire. Football seemed like destiny. A knee injury at Florida State University cut that dream short, and for a while, Reynolds drifted, unsure of what came next. But fate has odd timing. An English professor encouraged him to explore acting, seeing a spark he hadn't yet recognized in himself. That unlikely nudge would eventually alter Hollywood history. Climbing the ladder, from TV cowboy to breakout film star in the late 1950s and 1960s, Reynolds paid his dues the traditional way. Small roles, guest appearances, long days on set. He became a TV staple in westerns, particularly through his recurring role on Gunsmoke. Audiences liked him. Casting directors noticed his rugged charm. But it wasn't until he started headlining shows like Hawk and Dan August that his star began to rise. Even then, Reynolds didn't explode overnight. Instead, he chipped away at the edges of fame, building momentum until the early 1970s finally revealed what Hollywood had on its hands. Deliverance and the shift into serious actor status. The watershed moment arrived with Deliverance, 1972, a harrowing thriller that showcased Reynolds' dramatic power. As Lewis Medlock, he played more than a tough outdoorsman. He delivered a magnetic performance that proved he had depth beneath the swagger. Critics took him seriously. Directors suddenly saw him in a new light. Deliverance opened doors, but it also opened the floodgates. The brand of Burt, an era defined by cool, cars, and charisma. Once Deliverance hit, Reynolds became a cultural force of nature. He mastered a genre blend that no one else could touch, action comedy with a wink. He was the handsome daredevil with a soft heart, the rebel who was somehow always lovable. Smokey and the Bandit is the crown jewel of this era. Cat and mouse chases, a black Trans Am, Sally Field by his side, and Reynolds driving like the road was his playground. Audiences didn't just watch him, they believed in him. This stretch of his career included The Longest Yard, 1974, WW and the Dixie Dance Kings, 1975, Hooper, 1978. A Love Letter to Hollywood Stunt Performers, Cannonball Run, 1981. For a solid stretch of years, he was the undisputed king of the box office. His mixture of mischief and charm made him a cultural shorthand for cool. The playboy persona and public fascination. Reynolds' off-screen image fed into the legend. His infamous 1972 Cosmopolitan centerfold, featuring him reclining nude on a bearskin rug, became one of the most iconic images of the decade. Some critics later viewed it as a misstep, but Reynolds never lost his sense of humor about it. His relationships, especially his high-profile romance with Sally Field, captivated the public. Their chemistry on-screen mirrored their deep affection off-screen, and Reynolds later called her the love of his life. Tough times, missteps, financial struggles, and career declines. No Hollywood story is all sunshine. The 1980s brought turmoil. A few poorly chosen roles slowed his momentum. A failed restaurant chain, a messy, very public divorce. Business setbacks crushed his finances, leading him into bankruptcy. Yet even during the downturn, he kept showing up for audiences. His sitcom Evening Shade, 1990 to 1994, proved he still had comedic magic and earned him an Emmy and a Golden Globe. Still, the industry wasn't quick to restore him to leading man status. The redemption arc, Boogie Nights and Beyond. Then came Boogie Nights, 1997. As Jack Horner, he brought gravity, compassion, and quiet sadness to the role of an aging adult film director. It was a performance rich with craft and restraint. Overnight, Reynolds was back in the awards conversation. Though he famously disliked aspects of the film and clashed with director Paul Thomas Anderson, his work remains one of the most celebrated highlights of his career. Later years. a veteran performer with lessons to share. In the 2000s and 2010s, Reynolds embraced supporting roles, teaching, memoir writing, and the occasional comeback project. He ran acting workshops in Florida and became something of a mentor figure to younger performers. His candor in interviews made him beloved all over again. He spoke openly about mistakes, regrets, and the cost of fame, showing a reflective side that deepened the public's affection for him. Even as his health declined, he worked steadily, continuing to chase the thing he loved most. Storytelling. Final curtain. The legacy of a Hollywood original. Burt Reynolds passed away on September 6, 2018, at age 82, leaving behind a legacy far larger than the films he starred in. His influence can be felt in modern action comedies, in the careers of actors who emulate his brand of humor and confidence, and in the nostalgia surrounding a uniquely American era of movie-making. He embodied a rare combination of grit, charm, humor, and humanity. The bandit hat, the boots, the smirk, the engines roaring behind him, all of it has become part of Hollywood's cultural DNA. Burt Reynolds didn't just entertain people. He made them feel like they were in on the adventure with him. And that's why his legend keeps rolling on. Burt Reynolds. A larger-than-life rebel who defined an era. Burt Reynolds wasn't just a movie star. He was a pop culture ecosystem all by himself. A man whose name instantly evokes fast cars, easy charm, Southern swagger, and that unmistakable grin. His story mirrors the classic American arc: promise, glory, fall, recovery, and reflection. And the more you look at his life, the more you see a man both blessed and bruised by the spotlight he chased. A fire lit early, roots, family, and the making of a tough kid growing up as the son of a strict police chief. Reynolds learned discipline the hard way. He once joked that living in his father's house was like living with the law itself. At the same time, his mother, Fern, brought warmth and boundless support. The push-pull between those two influences shaped the duality audiences would later love: the confident tough guy with a soft heart. Football gave young Burt purpose. He lived for the game. But when that brutal knee injury shattered his athletic future, he described it as losing the only dream I had. That grief could have broken him. Instead, it cracked him open to an entirely different destiny: the spark of stardom. Finding his lane in Hollywood, Reynolds showed up in Hollywood with a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. Casting directors pegged him as handsome, maybe too handsome, but they often missed his raw intelligence and comedic instinct. He hustled. He played Native American characters in westerns. He took unglamorous roles, devoured scripts, studied actors he admired. The grind paid off slowly, but it paid off. By the time he became a regular on television, he'd earned his charisma. It wasn't the slick, manufactured charm of a studio product. His edge came from lived experience. The genius of his star power. Why audiences loved him. Reynolds had a rare trick. He made audiences feel like he was in on the joke. That shared wink forged a bond that no marketing department could manufacture. He played anti-heroes who acted out but had good hearts. He played daredevils who risked everything but never lost their humanity. He played troublemakers who were, at their core, people trying to do the right thing. This brand made him irresistible. And it wasn't just the swagger. It was the honesty behind it. Inside the Smokey and the Bandit explosion, when Smokey hit theaters in 1977, it didn't just become a blockbuster. It became a cultural movement. Truckers, radio DJs, Southern families, car enthusiasts, college kids, everyone latched onto the Bandit. The chemistry between Reynolds and Sally Field was lightning in a bottle. Their relationship behind the scenes only fueled the warmth on screen. Reynolds didn't pretend he was doing Shakespeare. He knew what the audience wanted: fun, energy, rebellion, humor. And he delivered with perfect timing. The success made him the top box office star in America for 5 consecutive years. A record few have matched since. Flaws, regrets, and the human cost of fame. Reynolds later admitted he made choices out of pride that hurt his career. He turned down roles in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Terms of Endearment, and even Die Hard. In hindsight, he called these decisions the dumbest mistakes I ever made. He also made the classic celebrity misstep: too many business ventures, too many yeses, too much trust in the wrong people. Bankruptcy wasn't just financial for him. It was emotional. But one thing defined him: he didn't quit. He cracked jokes about his own failures. He refused to hide. That resilience is part of why people still feel connected to him. The Sally Field chapter: Love That Never Quite Left. Of all the relationships Reynolds had, Sally Field was the one that lingered in the public imagination. Their bond crackled with warmth and mischief, both on screen and off. Reynolds never stopped calling her the love of my life. The ache in that sentiment revealed a rare vulnerability, one he usually hid behind humor. Field eventually said their relationship was complicated. He admitted he wasn't always easy to love. But the affection they shared became part of his myth, an emotional anchor that gave depth to his public persona. Boogie Nights and the reinvention of an icon. When Reynolds stepped into Boogie Nights, it was like watching a veteran athlete prove he still had fire in the tank. As Jack Horner, he brought dignity, melancholy, and quiet authority. Awards buzz roared. He won a Golden Globe. He was nominated for an Oscar. And yet, he famously refused to watch the movie and turned down roles in the sequels. He clashed with the director. He wrestled with the subject matter. But none of that diminished the brilliance of the performance. It reminded the world that Reynolds could still command the screen like few others. Teaching, mentoring, and his final years. Reynolds loved the craft of acting. He also loved passing it on. In his later years, he held classes, guided young actors, and talked openly about the realities of the industry. Students admired him not for fame, but for honesty. He told them when they weren't good enough. He also told them how to get better. He was old school but never unkind. Even as his health declined, he kept acting. He kept showing up. He kept laughing at himself. He kept being Burt. Why his legacy still feels so alive. Burt Reynolds isn't remembered just because he was popular. He's remembered because he represented a form of movie stardom that's almost extinct today. He was relatable, charming, flawed, warm, unfiltered, larger than life, completely himself. Reynolds didn't play heroes. He played humans. And audiences felt that. He gave Hollywood a version of masculinity that was strong but not cold, confident but not cruel, fearless but still lovable. That balance is rare. His movies are still comfort watches. His interviews still circulate online. His laugh still feels familiar to people who weren't even born while he was dominating the box office. Burt Reynolds: the rise, fall, reinvention, and reverberation of a Hollywood titan. Burt Reynolds belonged to a very specific category of celebrity. He wasn't simply famous. He was iconic in a way that's almost impossible to replicate now. His energy, humor, vulnerability, and unapologetic swagger formed a character so big that Hollywood eventually bent around him. But behind the mustache, the stunts, the charm, and the swagger was a man who constantly wrestled with identity, purpose, regret, pride, and the search for something like peace. The more layers you peel back, the more fascinating he becomes. The Hollywood landscape. Burt entered, a man out of time, yet perfectly timed. Reynolds showed up in Hollywood during a changing era. The old studio system was fading. The 60s and 70s New Hollywood revolution was rising. Acting was shifting away from stiff leading men and toward more naturalistic, rebellious personalities. He slid right into that lane. He wasn't polished like Cary Grant. He wasn't tortured like Brando. He wasn't cool in the sleek, tailored way of Paul Newman. Reynolds was raw, mischievous, physical, and unpretentious. He was the guy who could jump off a building for a stunt, crack a joke afterward, then flash a smile like he knew you were rooting for him. That collision of machismo and approachability made him a bridge between generations of movie stars. The stuntman's soul. Why physicality defined his stardom. Reynolds admired stunt performers. He respected their grind. He trusted their instincts. His time working on action-heavy sets made him fall in love with the life-or-death playfulness of it all. He wasn't just willing to do his own stunts. He relished it. Movies like Hooper highlight how personal this was. Hooper is practically a love letter to stunt performers who sacrifice their bodies for movie magic. Reynolds idolized them more than actors. In interviews, he would often say, "Stuntmen are the real heroes on set." His athletic background made him uniquely primed for this world. The pain didn't scare him. The risk didn't deter him. The physicality added authenticity to his performances, something audiences could feel. The self-deprecating humor that made him a talk show legend. Part of Reynolds' stardom came not from movies but from talk shows. Especially The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. He wasn't just a guest, he was a phenomenon. He bantered like a comedian. He told stories like he was at a bar. He teased himself before anyone else could. That willingness to take the hit in a joke made audiences adore him. It made him look human, approachable. While other actors clung to dignity or mystique, Reynolds let people see the guy behind the curtain. Carson loved him. The audience loved him. Hollywood tolerated him because audiences wouldn't let them ignore him. His relationship with fame, love, resentment, and addiction to the spotlight. Reynolds was honest later in life about the complicated relationship he had with fame. He liked the money. He liked the admiration. He liked the adrenaline. But he disliked the pressure. He disliked the scrutiny. He disliked the expectation that he always had to be on. He admitted that he sometimes sabotaged opportunities simply because he didn't trust the industry. He feared vulnerability yet desperately craved validation. It was a tension that shaped his entire career. The movies he turned down. A gallery of ghost roles. Reynolds famously rejected some of Hollywood's most iconic roles. He later said he regretted almost every one he turned down. Jack Nicholson's role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Richard Gere's role in Pretty Woman, Bruce Willis' role in Die Hard, Harrison Ford's role in Star Wars. Yes. He said no to Han Solo. Each decision chipped away at long-term credibility. But it also reflected his instincts at the time. He was riding high on fame and thought he could do anything without consequence. He later admitted that ego made him blind to the huge career-shaping potential of these roles. The Sally Field love story, the one he never got over. Reynolds didn't talk about regrets often. But when he talked about Sally Field, he dropped the confident facade and spoke more openly than usual. He adored her. He admired her. He wanted a future with her. And he blew it. Field later said he was emotionally complicated during their relationship, struggling with fame, expectations, and insecurities. Their romance ended, but the memory didn't fade. Reynolds said late in life, "I miss her terribly. I wish I could go back and fix things." Hollywood love stories are usually glamorous. This one was raw, human, and unfinished. Career decline. When the movies stopped believing in the star who never quit, the 1980s and early 90s were rough. His injuries from years of stunt work caught up with him. A bad jaw injury left him on painkillers. Financial losses piled up. Tabloids hounded him relentlessly. His bankruptcy was humiliating, but he never pretended otherwise. He cracked jokes about it, partly because humor was a coping mechanism and partly because honesty was all he had left. What kept him afloat was his work ethic. Even when Hollywood labeled him over, he kept showing up. The miracle of Evening Shade wasn't just a TV revival. It was a rebirth. Reynolds brought warmth and comedic ease to the role of Wood Newton, a former pro athlete turned small-town coach. The show worked because it mirrored his own life, a man who'd been through storms and still wanted connection. The sitcom won him an Emmy and reminded audiences that he still had magic. White Boogie Nights hit so hard when Reynolds appeared as Jack Horner in 1997, the industry gasped. This wasn't the cocky daredevil of the 70s. This was a layered, weary, emotionally complex character. It was a reminder of what he could do when he dropped the walls. His discomfort with the film only added to the mythology. Even in success, he wrestled with the same anxieties and stubborn pride that haunted him throughout his life. But critics? They were unanimous. Burt Reynolds was back. Final years, honesty, humor, and hard-won wisdom late in life, Reynolds shed much of the bravado. He became reflective, gentle, humble, candid about mistakes, grateful for fans. His interviews from that era are some of his most beloved moments. He laughed at himself. He praised old friends. He apologized to people he'd hurt. He forgave himself for things that once tortured him. This version of Burt was softer, wiser, and deeply human. The enduring spirit of Burt Reynolds. His death in 2018 felt like the end of something bigger than a single life. It felt like the end of a certain kind of Hollywood, the era of charm without pretense. The era of heroes with a wink. The era of movie stars who felt like friends. Reynolds' legacy is alive because he embodied something timeless, charisma with heart. You can feel it in his films. You can hear it in his laughter. You can see it in the way people still talk about him. He didn't try to be perfect. He tried to be real. And that's why he'll never fade. A man of contradictions, the inner turbulence behind the easy smile. What made Burt Reynolds compelling wasn't just talent or charisma. It was the interplay between who he seemed to be and who he really was. On the surface, loud, funny, confident, irresistible, effortlessly charming. Beneath it, self-doubt, insecurity, fear of vulnerability, a need for approval, a lifelong struggle with pride. These contradictions didn't weaken him as a performer. They deepened him. They gave him emotional texture. You could feel both the bravado and the ache in his best roles, even the comedic ones. He once said, "I spent my life trying to convince people I was the toughest guy in the room when I never truly felt that way." That honesty, even late in life, showed the complicated soul behind the legend. Friendships, rivalries, and the Hollywood Boys Club. Reynolds wasn't a loner in Hollywood. He thrived in the boys' club culture that dominated the 1970s and early 80s. Though he had far more emotional intelligence than he let on. He was close to Hal Needham, legendary stuntman and director, Dom DeLuise, a comedic partner who brought out his playful side, Jerry Reed, musician and co-star with an infectious energy, Jack Nicholson. Friendly rivals in the same era of stardom, Charles Nelson Riley, longtime friend and mentor figure, with Needham. The bond was practically brotherhood. Needham lived in Reynolds' guesthouse for years. The two shared a creative connection that shaped Reynolds' biggest hits. Reynolds trusted him, sometimes to a fault, but that friendship birthed some of the most iconic American movies of the era. Behind the scenes. The making of a Burt Reynolds classic. Let's zoom in on the vibe that defined the sets of his most popular films. Smokey and the Bandit. The set was chaotic, fun, and often improvised. Reynolds encouraged it. He thrived on spontaneity. Many of the jokes in the film weren't in the script. The car chases were more dangerous than they appeared. And the chemistry with Sally Field? Pure electricity. Hooper. This was the stuntman's anthem. Reynolds insisted real stunt performers take center stage. The production was physically brutal but emotionally meaningful to him. It's one of the films he felt closest to personally. The Longest Yard, a perfect mix of humor and grit. Reynolds brought authenticity from his own football background, and the cast adored him. You can feel the camaraderie on screen. Cannonball Run, controlled chaos. Improvised jokes. Real friendships. Near jackass-level stunt insanity. Reynolds loved working with Dom DeLuise so much that those scenes feel like two friends cracking each other up for real. His body, his injuries, and the toll of being his own stuntman. Reynolds didn't get through life unscathed. He racked up injuries like badges of honor. Broken bones, damaged knees, chronic back pain, permanent jaw damage. Years of physical wear that would eventually change his face. Those injuries weren't movie pain, they were real-life consequences of giving everything to his work. The painkiller dependence he developed after a stunt gone wrong was a quiet, personal battle he carried for years. A lot of people don't realize just how much pain he lived with day to day. He hid it well, but it shaped a huge part of his middle career. The tabloids and the feeding frenzy. Reynolds also lived through a brutal era of tabloid culture. The 1980s and 90s gossip machine was relentless, and he was prime fodder. Messy divorce headlines, financial ruin stories, health rumors, endless speculation. He didn't always handle it gracefully. But he handled it honestly. He confronted it head-on, often with humor. He weaponized self-deprecation like a shield. If he made the joke first, nobody else could hurt him with it. The teacher and the soft-spoken mentor in his later years. Reynolds shifted into a new phase of life that many fans don't know about. He became a teacher. And not a celebrity instructor showing up for photo ops. He taught every week. Students said he was tough but deeply invested in their success. He didn't tolerate laziness. He didn't flatter. But he cared. He told them the truths he wished someone had told him. Don't chase fame. Don't let ego pick your roles. Don't forget who you are when the lights go out. It wasn't just about acting. It was about life. The emotional gravity of his final years. By the time Reynolds entered his later years, something shifted. The mask dropped. The bravado softened. He seemed freer. There was a tenderness in his interviews. A gentler laugh. A willingness to reflect on regret without bitterness. He praised old collaborators. He spoke lovingly of mistakes. He apologized where he felt he'd fallen short. He expressed gratitude for what he had. He became a man at peace with the chaos he'd survived. Why Burt Reynolds still matters. Reynolds represents a type of movie star almost extinct today. Physical, funny, flawed, accessible, unfiltered, warm, unmistakably human. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't plastic or polished. He was real. He was messy. He was magnetic. He was unforgettable. And that's why he'll always matter. The roots of his resilience. A childhood that built a fighter. Reynolds' resilience didn't come from Hollywood. It came from home. His father, Burt Sr., was a stern World War II veteran turned police chief. He wasn't expressive, wasn't indulgent, and rarely praised young Burt. That absence of verbal affection shaped him. It created a hunger for approval that would follow him his entire life. But his mother, Fern, was the opposite. She was open-hearted, encouraging, and endlessly proud of him. She was his anchor, the person he returned to emotionally whenever fame felt overwhelming. This split in parenting built one of the key psychological forces that defined him, a longing to be loved and a fear he didn't deserve it. It made him tough. It made him driven. It made him charming. And it also made him vulnerable in ways he rarely admitted until he was older. The post-football void, a crisis of identity. People often gloss over just how devastating his football injury was. It wasn't just a career-ending event. It was a life-ending event, at least for the life he'd imagined. Reynolds had tied his identity to athletics. The grind, the team dynamic, the discipline, the structure. It was all he knew. Acting wasn't a dream, it was a rescue. He didn't pick acting because he felt destined for it. He picked it because everything else had been taken from him. That loss gave him a kind of emotional jet fuel. You can see it in his early performances. There's always a flicker of someone who's fighting to prove he belongs. Hollywood's Golden Rogues Gallery. Reynolds and his era. To truly understand Reynolds, you have to understand his competition. He rose alongside some of the most magnetic personalities in film history. Clint Eastwood with his icy cool, Robert Redford with his effortless elegance, Jack Nicholson with his wicked unpredictability, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro with their volcanic intensity. Reynolds stood out because he wasn't any of those things. He wasn't brooding. He wasn't polished. He wasn't method-trained. He wasn't intimidating. He was fun. He was masculine without being cruel. He was rebellious without being tragic. He was sexy without taking himself too seriously. He was charismatic without demanding worship. That balance made him one of a kind. It also made him a natural star in the 70s. When audiences wanted escape mixed with personality. Why audiences loved him. A star who felt familiar. There's something underrated about Reynolds. He made stardom feel friendly. He looked like someone you could talk to. He laughed like someone who genuinely enjoyed people. He had a playful glint in his eye that made it feel like you were in on a secret with him. Most actors create distance between themselves and the audience. It's part of their mystique. Reynolds created closeness. That's why he became a phenomenon on talk shows. He wasn't performing charm. He was charm. He was the kind of guest who could sit on a couch and make millions of people feel like buddies. The Cosmos centerfold. The joke heard round the world, that infamous 1972 Cosmopolitan nude photo spread? It didn't just shock people. It changed the landscape of celebrity culture. Reynolds did it partly as a joke. He thought it was funny. He thought it would get a reaction. He didn't fully think about the long-term consequences. And yet, it became a defining pop culture moment. It was audacious. It was playful. It was controversial. And it showed how he understood publicity better than almost anyone else at the time. But later, Reynolds admitted he regretted it. Not because he was embarrassed, but because he worried it overshadowed the seriousness of Deliverance, which released the same year. It was a perfect Burt Reynolds moment, bold, funny, culturally explosive, and quietly self-sabotaging. A career built on chemistry. Some actors succeed alone on talent. Some succeed on looks. Some succeed on intensity. Reynolds succeeded on chemistry. He had a rare gift for connecting with other performers on screen, whether it was romance, rivalry, or comedy. His top-tier chemistry partners: Sally Field, romantic spark with warmth and humor; Dom DeLuise, pure comedic electricity; Jerry Reed, country charm and brotherly energy; Jon Voight, dramatic.
Bye bye. Thanks for watching. Bye.